Hello and happy Sunday. Welcome to another Secrets of an English Tutor. My name is Sarah Lynn, and this week we are looking at an effective way to introduce a quote. Now, if you've been with us since the beginning, you have seen that we have covered specific sentence types, like the difference between a subordinate clause and a phrase. We've also looked at the skill of identifying mood within a piece of literature. All of this is building us towards being able to analyze text. When we have accomplished the analysis of our text, our next job is to start writing our response. And this is a really important question that we get asked all the time. How can I introduce my quote without continuously saying so and so said? The author said, the writer included. So I'm very excited to bring forward this really important topic. Now, as a reminder, this topic is not just something that our older students need to be aware of. Whether your child is getting ready for the 11 plus, the ISEB, the SATs exams, a transition exam, or their GCSEs, this type of topic, knowing how to introduce a quote is really going to set your child apart and set them up for success in those later years. So knowing it now will only be of their benefit. So let's dive in to explore an effective way to introduce a quote. Why format matters. The most important thing is that we need it to flow. We can't just rewrite a whole sentence into our own sentence. Not only does it not flow, but when we're in an exam situation, there is a time pressure, and it makes no sense for you spending valuable time rewriting a sentence when we can just include an ellipsis, ... and then pull the key words that we are going to specifically zone in on. Another reason why introducing a quote has a specific format is because it needs context. We need to have a clear introduction that we are taking the words of someone else and we're using it for a particular outcome, and that is usually to do with analysis. There are three things that we teach our English students to do when it comes to introducing a quotation. The first is to signal. We have to provide context or tell the reader who is speaking. We might say something like Lewis Carroll or in an inspector calls first chapter. This gives context and gives the reader a signal that we are about to lay down some information that has been specifically taken from a text. The next thing we do is show. We connect what the author is saying to our own argument. Lewis Carroll describes Alice as childish. Okay, we have set ourselves up. We have said who the speaker is. We have said what the context is and what we are about to discuss. The last part is to weave. We need to seamlessly weave their words into our own. Lewis Carroll describes Alice as childish after she loses control of her emotions and cried. Now, this is a specific word that we've zoned in on from a sentence within a passage that we were asked to investigate. Of course, a little bit later on, we're going to include the literary devices that help us see this, the different emotive language. So this is just one particular word that's going to set the stage and let the reader know that we are going to start analyzing the text. This by itself will not work as a full analysis of the text, but it gives you an idea of how we can pull specific words for our own benefit. looking at it in action. We're going to go through different year groups. And as we go through the year groups, you're going to see the different ways that we can introduce a quote. This is a year 5 example for narrative writing. The prompt says, write a story set in a magical forest. Include the quote, the trees whispered secrets in the wind. This is an ineffective introduction. This is something that one of my students has already done prior to us investigating the ways to appropriately introduce a quotation. This is what they wrote. The trees whispered secrets in the wind as Susie walked through the forest. Why is this ineffective? Well, one, it's not very imaginative. Two, there's no signal that we're going to use this quote. Three, there's actually no comma after the word wind, and that would be an inappropriate inclusion of a quote. So let's look at an effective introduction. As Lucy stepped into the magical forest, that's our signal and our context, she couldn't help but recall her grandfather's words. Okay, we're showing where we are. She has a semicolon to introduce the quote, and we know it's her grandfather's words, but we didn't have to say the word said. We just have recall her grandfather's words. Here they are. The trees whispered secrets in the wind. So the context is Lucy stepped into the magical forest. The connection is she couldn't help but recall her grandfather's words. That's why we're able to pull that quote in effectively. Okay, year 7, this is an literary analysis. Here's our prompt. Analyze how a character's emotions are portrayed in The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. The quote that we need to look at. He looked down and did something quite out of character. He took hold of Shamal's tiny hand in his and squeezed it tightly. Ineffective introduction. The boy was moved, perhaps scared. We know this because, semicolon, he looked down and did something quite out of character. So what they're saying here isn't necessarily incorrect. We think like the analysis is decent. We know that the boy had some kind of an emotional reaction. We know that there was something that made him do an action that's out of character, which could be because he was afraid, he was scared. And we used the introduction of a quote with a semicolon. However, it is not very effective, and there is a better way that we could do it. First, who is the boy that we're talking about? Who's the he? He is Bruno. So let's use the name if we know it. Bruno's transformation is evident when he shows empathy toward Shamal by taking, quote, hold of Shamal's tiny hand in his, ... Bruno's transformation is evident. Well, we wanted to know how a character's emotions are portrayed. This is a good analysis because it shows that there is a transformation, which makes sense because the quote said that he did something out of character, which would infer that there was a transformation that took place. And then we only grabbed the important part that emphasized this showing of empathy that was out of character. Looking at a GCSE example, this is essay writing, so we're doing a critical analysis here. The prompt says, discuss how tension is created in an inspector calls. The specific quote that they want us to look at is, we don't live alone. We are members of one body. We are responsible for each other. An ineffective introduction that one of our GCSE students started with before they learned how to introduce quotations. The narrator demonstrates tension by saying, colon, we don't live alone. We are members of one body. Okay, this lacks a showing or a signal because who is the narrator? This lacks context because I have no idea why this demonstrates tension. It does introduce the quotation in a somewhat effective way. Again, we've seen this colon introduction of the sentence, but it doesn't really drive it home or show us that we're past a grade 4. So let's look at an effective introduction. We are signaling by saying who the speaker is. Priestley. Okay, we are showing what the context is. Priestley highlights his key theme of social responsibility when the inspector reminds the family that they are ... members of one body ... and ... responsible for each other. So we have a context and a connection here. We've also seen the use of shortening our quotations with the use of an ellipsis. So this would be an effective grade 5 to grade 6 introduction. Of course, to get a grade 9, we would probably be looking for a little bit more analysis that would continue in the actual paragraph, which would likely be a petal paragraph. Let's start thinking about sentence starters. If your child really is looking for sentence starters, here are some common ones broken down into specific year groups. So between year 5 and year 6, common positive, effective sentence starters can look like, in the story, the character says, the author describes this when they write. This is shown in the text, colon, your quote. We can see this when it says, for example, the author writes. Your power verbs here are says, describes, shows, explains, tells. An example, the author shows the importance of teamwork when they write, the group worked together to solve the problem or the puzzle. Year 7 to 8. So this is where we're looking at a little bit more nuanced sentence starters and more powerful verbs. It doesn't mean that your child should stick within their year group, but they should master the application of their year group sentence starters and power verbs before moving on. So that way there it's in their memory, they understand, they know it before they can upgrade themselves. So year 7, year 8 sentence starters. The writer highlights this idea by stating, this is illustrated when the text says, the character's emotions are revealed through the line. The author emphasizes this point by writing, for instance, the text demonstrates this. Our power verbs here are highlights, illustrates, emphasizes, reveals, demonstrates. An example, the writer emphasizes the character's bravery when they write, she stepped into the darkness without hesitation. We should have quotation marks finished there. Okay, we are now looking at year 9 to year 10 sentence starters. This idea is reinforced when the author states, the text claims that. The writer suggests this by saying, this theme is developed when the character says, that's a good one. The author's use of language illustrates this in the quote. I like that one as well. Power verbs, reinforces, claims, suggests, develops, illustrates. So as you can see, some of these are going to be power verbs from year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8, all the way through. We can use very similar words. However, it is the sentence starter or the way that we include them in our sentence that really shows the difference between a grade 3 to a grade 9 or a year 5 to a year 9 or 10. The example here is the author suggests that trust is difficult to rebuild when they write, "A broken vase can never hold water again." And then you would go into saying how this is a technique and then what the implication of that technique is. All right, heading over to GCSE sentence starters. Priestley argues this point through the inspector's words, colon, quote. This is supported by the line in the text that states, the author's choice of words here highlights, Shakespeare demonstrates this theme in the line. This quote reinforces the idea that. We've got power verbs, argues, supports, highlights, demonstrates, reinforces. Example, Shakespeare demonstrates the inevitable fate of Romeo and Juliet when Romeo says, "I defy you, stars." Okay, so to wrap up, there are 3 things that your child must master in order to effectively introduce a quote within their paragraph, especially if it's an analytical paragraph where we want them to analyze the word choices of the author's writing. There's 3 parts. The first is signal. Tell us who the writer is or the speaker. Show us what it is that we are listening to or the context of from where the quote comes from. And then weave, not only putting a colon and then writing out the text, but don't be afraid to grab specific words and put it into your actual sentence so it flows. If your child needs help with this or anything else, math or English related, we are so happy to be here to help you and your child succeed. So if you are looking for one-to-one tuition, Bettering Youth Tutors would be happy to help. Just head to our website to book a free consultation. I am so excited to chatting with you next week. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you on Sunday.